In this lesson, we'll talk about using different strokes as well as alphas to create different high-resolution details across the skin. So let's say that we have our details sculpted in. We have a lot of the wrinkles and the overall shapes. And let's say now, though, we want to add some sort of higher resolution detail to do like a skin look or texture across this guy. And so we want to make sure first that we have enough polygons to hold that detail. So we've got about 1.8 million polygons. So I think that should be enough to start with at least. So what we can do now is I'm going to just go back to get the standard brush. And now you can see here, right below the brush, we have an area for the stroke type. And then right below that, we have an area for the alpha. And these two things are going to decide how we're able to add this high resolution detail across the surface. So the alpha will allow us to create different sort of shapes here. So let's get this alpha 58, let's say. And if we come in here, you can see we can sort of create these sort of scarry kind of patterns. If we turn on Z sub, it'll actually cut it into the surface. Take down our Z intensity and you get these sort of wrinkled shapes, which could be good if you wanted to come in here and add, extra wrinkles across the surface, but you didn't necessarily want them to need to do them all at once. You could also create kind of a skin texture by coming across and sort of crisscrossing those around. And this is just using the dots stroke. It'd be similar to using the freehand stroke where you're just able to drag this across. But there are different stroke types. So let's say that we wanted to just do like one instance of the detail. So let's say we want to create sort of a bumpy look in certain areas. So let's get this alpha 07. Now if we just drag it across, you can see it basically creates streaks. But if we change this to a drag rectangle, this will allow us to drag out, let's do it on the shoulders, drag out instances of this. We'll go to Z add and increase the intensity so we can see it a little bit better. This will allow us to drag out individual instances of this alpha. So we can, if we overlap these, we can start to get kind of some detail in here that we can use this sort of the high-res bump on the skin. Okay, we can come down here and start to add it as well, right? So that drag rectangle can be a really useful tool. We can also get this alpha 58 and we could come in here and say, okay, I'm going to drag out some, oops, we undo that, some wrinkles down here between the legs. Let's get a fairly low intensity. And then I can start to come across and drag these out at different angles to get different looks. And so you can see we can start to get some really cool kind of skin type of a look in there, kind of an elephant skin kind of a look. We can do the same thing in some of these areas down here. Get kind of a smaller brush size. And so anywhere we have those wrinkles, we can start to come in and add that. Now, if we want to create kind of an overall bumpiness, we could use either spray or color spray, and that will allow us to take something like this, alpha 7, and you can see we can just add it across the surface. Let's take our intensity down quite a bit. And so this just varies the different elements of that and allow us to add very quickly detail across the surface. So if we come in here to our spray stroke, you can see we can change the placement, the scale, the color, the flow. And so changing those up allow us to vary that. So it's not just along the stroke, but it's actually adding those copies, and they're sort of, in the case of this, just bumpy noise, you're able to get a very seamless kind of a look. So we could come in here and add some bumpiness across the surface. Just kind of break things up a little bit. You can change the intensity and the brush size, draw size if you want to. Come in here and just add a little bit of that bumpiness across the surface. And that's one of the ways that we can start to add this kind of detail. Okay, maybe this bumpiness is just on the the outer part of these little tentacle things, but maybe the underside doesn't have that bumpiness. And so depending on the stroke type that you use as well as the alpha, you can experiment a little bit to get different kinds of effects. So, I could come back in here with freehand and grab this alpha 58 and start to draw out some sort of wrinkles across here, maybe across the head a little bit more, and start to add a little bit more detail that way. Come in up here. So there's really a ton of flexibility that you have here in adding all of this higher resolution skin type detail, depending on the type of stroke that you choose, as well as the kind of alpha that you're using. And then of course you pick whether you want it to be pushed in or pulled out. For these wrinkles, normally I'll go ahead and just push those in. And so we can just kind of use this to emphasize things a little bit more and add a little bit more of that wrinkling to the body. Okay, so experiment a little bit with those strokes. You could come in here on the arms and kind of go in and add a little bit more of that kind of wrinkling there and kind of alternate between sort of smoothing it out, coming back in. Again, just all depending on the kind of look that you want to get. Now, if you get something that's really faceted and it doesn't look like it's holding the detail, try subdividing your model again and just make sure that you have enough resolution in there to hold that detail that you're creating or that you're attempting to create. If you don't have enough detail, there's just nothing there to hold it. Okay, so we're going through this pretty quick, but you kind of get the idea. If you go through the intro, we'll talk about noise, but one other thing that you can just try, I'm not going to really go over it, is just adding a level of surface noise. And this is kind of a procedural thing where you can just add different kinds of noise here, and then you can apply it and bake it down. So you turn that on, say okay, and then you have an extra level of noise there. I think you can kind of see that. In this case, it's pretty high resolution, but you can change the type of noise that you have there. All right, so once you've added a little bit of high frequency detail across the skin, and I maybe try to blend it together a little bit more, maybe kind of smooth some of these out a little bit, and just work it together so it works as a whole. The next thing that we'll talk about is using the transpose line that we talked about earlier to create a little bit more of a pose to our character. So we'll go ahead and do that next.